Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick reminder that if you're listening on YouTube, that we're also now available to listen to on Spotify. So please head down to the link in the description and check us out there as well. On with the episode.
I was focusing so much on trying to get back in, putting so much pressure on scoring runs that it wasn't happening anyway, and I wasn't enjoying it. So I think every cricketer's had it. It's just about, when you maybe do feel like that, is trying to take a step back when you do have the chance and refreshing and getting ready to go again, and getting around your teammates, which is the best part about the job. I don't really like how people specialise so quickly like these days. I think I loved how I played football and went snowboarding and went skating and went all these things, whereas now you see like 10-year-olds just not doing anything else because they play cricket. I think that will come in time, and I think the development you get from all those other aspects is so key to becoming, like as you said, like a well-rounded sort of person rather than just someone who plays cricket.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Fitzness Podcast. I'm joined by a special guest today, very special guest, James Bracey, obviously Gloucestershire batsman, if you don't know, living under a rock. But obviously known Brace for a little bit now, and I'm really, really, really happy to have him on. Brace, welcome firstly.
Thanks, mate. Pleasure.
No worries. No worries. So secondly, mate, before we get into any of the serious stuff, I'm an absolute child at this first bit, mate, asking an icebreaker question, okay? Now, if anyone's seen James's socials, obviously linked down in the description. If you haven't, he's a pretty active guy, wicketkeeper and batter as well, so does a hell of a lot. Lifts the gym and a half every single time he goes in, from what I've heard. But if you weren't a cricketer, mate, what other activity would you be doing apart from your job?
Well, I'm a big fan of all sports. If I could be anything, I'd love my F1 driver. Looks like the best gig in the world. But I mean, that's pretty unrealistic. I'd probably just be playing a lot of subpar golf, I'd imagine. A lot more than I am now.
That's a good one, mate. I loved the realistic one, and then the one that followed the aspirational one, mate. Can't see why not, mate. Never know. F1 career could be around the corner. But no, mate. Obviously, cracking on with your journey. Obviously, everyone should know, or if they don't, obviously, James been at Gloss for, was it 5-6 years?
I think this is going into my 7th now. Yeah.
Oh no!
I know.
A couple of years
Crazy.
off. Obviously, brilliant form led him to making his Test debut for England, which was outstanding. I'm sure we'll get into that. But surprisingly enough, I think James will probably tell his journey a little bit better than I can. So I think, James, over to you, mate. Obviously, where did it start for you? Obviously, James, another Loughborough alumni. So pretty dominant with them on the podcast at the moment, which is brilliant. So, mate, over to you.
I mean, started pretty low key in Bristol. Any normal sort of lad, love the sport. Grew up with a brother, so pretty competitive naturally.
Backyard cricket all
the way. Sort of always prioritised football really until I was about 13, and then sort of played a bit for Gloss, age groups and stuff, and really sort of kicked into gear about 13, where I really started enjoying my cricket. Got to about 17, and sort of wasn't really that close to the Gloss setup. I just sort of joined the academy, but probably not quite ready. So 18, wasn't offered a contract, so decided to go to Loughborough. I really wanted to pursue, obviously, as you know, anyone who wants to pursue high level sport, go to Loughborough, and you've got a pretty good sniff at it. And went there and kicked on. That was the best 3 years I could have had for my development. Had the best time, came out of it, and was signed with Gloss and playing in the 4-day side. So probably achieved everything I wanted to from it.
And then what about sort of from that point onwards? Because I think the classical probable comment to that is once you sort of sign your first professional contract, the hard work then begins then.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Yeah, I actually think just before I signed my first contract was real tough, because juggling uni with playing full time was tricky. I started playing sort of full time with Gloss in my last year of uni, just before I'd started my first full time deal. So that was really, really hard, balancing all that out. But yeah, definitely once I then left uni and felt like it was my profession rather than just, you know, playing professional cricket. That was what I was doing with my life. Certainly adds a little bit of pressure, and you've got to really dial in and work hard from that point onwards.
Nice. And was it always, right, I'm going to become a professional cricketer at some point, or was it going to uni for a backup plan just in case?
Yeah, that's why I went to uni. I think I always wanted to be a cricketer, hence my selection of where I went to university. But I also knew that, you know, it's a very good university in terms of the degree I could come out with as well. And I reckon going into sort of the end of my second year, I was, you know, looking for job opportunities, maybe just in case I wasn't offered that deal, and lining that up, which part of the industry I wanted to go into, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was definitely a bit of both. The ideal plan was, you know, what happened coming out with a contract, but I knew that there was always an opportunity that there was a chance that opportunity wouldn't come. So has to be prepared for that as well.
How was your mindset then from not being offered a contract at the start, going through uni, and then being offered one later on? Was it similar, almost like deja vu for you from the academy and then from after university as well?
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, I made some pretty big steps in that 3 years. You know, I went from not getting in Gloucester's second team the summer before I went to uni to playing in the first team by the end of my first year. Playing, you know, half the season in the first team in my second year. Also not getting picked by Loughborough in my first year. To go into playing for Gloss by the end of the year. And then sort of playing a full season in 2018, which was my final year. So it all progressed really, really quickly. It was just very strange to know that before I went to Loughborough, my cricket career was a whole lot different to when I left. So you know, I'm definitely very thankful for that, for Loughborough, for getting me there, really.
And how was your mindset then from keeping to work hard after both of the, or so maybe when the times got a bit tougher, and like you said, just after the academy stuff and then before the end of uni? Did that affect your cricket in any way, having a bit of pressure on your shoulders, then progressing? Because I think it's very common to know that when, I think we spoke about it with Callum Taylor a couple of episodes ago, where, you know, you almost feel like you're playing your best when you're almost not thinking about too much.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's similar to you.
Yeah, I've definitely actually found that when I've been studying and I've been under a lot of pressure with my work, is I've actually got really good results on the field as well. Hence why I've continued to study. You know, it's a small part of the reason why I continue to do it. I like to be occupied, and because I like to think really in depth about my cricket, a lot of the time, or often, that can be too much. So it's always nice to have things that, you know, strip back a little bit from that and allow me to just go out on the field and not expend too much energy on thinking about stuff that, you know, might be irrelevant.
Did you find that a bit tougher, maybe considering or sort of comparing yourself to other players who maybe don't keep wicket, or maybe just bowl or just field, maybe batters who obviously have a bit of time in the field to think about it, whereas as a keeper, you're literally dialed in, and a batter as well, you're dialed into every single ball that you're involved in?
Yeah, and it is fatiguing. I think even though I, you know, enjoy both disciplines, I really enjoy both. It is difficult. I found that last year, you know, in Division 1, fielding a lot as a team, and having a lot of games where we just got ground down. I was literally on the park for 2 days and then having to go straight out and bat, and it probably wasn't the best thing for me. You know, it's something that I've been trying to figure out and work out the best way to go about it, because I don't want to give up either.
No. How, was there processes for you? Is that a big thing for you? Because I've actually found the opposite. For me, if I try to have my little routines going every single time, I almost feel like I'm thinking about too much. So I've obviously actually stopped doing that quite a lot in my own game. So what about you? Is it a lot of routine for you, or is it more just consistency across the board?
Yeah, more consistency across the board. I've tried a lot of routines. I mean, you know, I've got a pre-ball routine, but I wouldn't say it's anything revolutionary. Like, it's been the same thing I've done since I was 16, just because that's what feels good. Preparation wise, again, like, I prepare well, but there isn't a strict things I do or a routine that I sort of go by. I like to just think more about, being accountable for what I'm, am I best prepared going into that game as I could be if I ticked every box that I think's important. And then afterwards, again, just being accountable for what's happened and using that as a way of learning before the next game rather than feeling or relying on anything that I feel, might push things in my favour, which a lot of the time things are things you can't control anyway.
Yeah, and how does that relate then to on the field, like sort of maybe mid-season where you're playing up to 3, maybe even 4 formats at some point if some players, thankfully, and, there's other tournaments out there which happen and sort of like James is going away to Australia to play. So there's a lot of cricket now being played throughout the whole year. So how do you almost deal with that mid-season and maybe games where form is very good and then where forms dip sometimes? How do you get over the bad times, and then how do you actually reflect on the good ones as well? Or do you reflect on both?
I think it's tough here because, as you said, there is so much cricket and you're playing and playing and playing and playing. There's almost not much time to think about it too much, which can be great in the fact, when it's not going well, it's real tough because the next game comes and you don't almost give yourself time to sit down, look at it and work out what's actually going wrong. You're just into the next game and you're thrust into it, and that sort of just continues, and it's horrible when you get into that streak. Likewise, when it's going really, really well and you're just in an unbelievable rhythm of just going out, scoring runs, not thinking too much about it, and it's just happening. Like, it's the best thing in the world because you could come out at the end of 2 weeks with 300s, 3 wins, and it's the best place in the world. So it is tough, but it's just important to keep reflecting on what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, even when you're scoring runs, trying to think of how you can get better. Maybe just giving yourself 20 minutes after a game just to think about those things, so that you don't sort of get 6 weeks down the line, you've had a poor 6 weeks and you think, oh, what's gone wrong? Which is very easy to do when there's so much cricket.
And you mentioned things going well for you, and obviously, like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, being able to make your test debut is pretty special.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'm very fortunate and really, really honoured to have you on, mate, because I think it's like I've had many like international athletes on thus far, swimmers, runners, things like that. But I suppose in today's day and age, England is sort of the pinnacle maybe for yourself as well, maybe sort of outside of that. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that, maybe how it came about and your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I was helped, I think, a little bit by COVID. Big squads meant I was introduced probably a year, 18 months earlier than I would have been, possibly if otherwise. So I found myself a little bit in the right place at the right time, and therefore sort of got, rather than making, I'd played some Lions games, but then just got thrust in with the main squad, and that was a huge learning experience. I probably did sort of a year, 4 or 5 different series, just around the squad training, sub-fielding, helping out the test team and getting a feel for that, which was unreal. Went to Sri Lanka, went to India, spent a lot of time with them in the UK. So probably did a lot of things that people just wouldn't have got the chance to do usually because, it was a pretty sort of unique situation. So, that was great. And then got back from India. And then the start of the 2021 season was just one of those periods where, I just felt really good, was keeping really well, was batting really well, scoring runs, Gloucester were winning games, and everything was sort of going to plan. And it worked out well because of the squad rotations and stuff that I, got an opportunity, which was unreal. Like, to say I've played for England is something that, you won't forget and no one could take away from you. So it was awesome.
How do you have to almost think of it as another game though, regardless of the fact that you've kind of, in a sense, in terms of the red ball cricket, you've reached the pinnacle in that sense. Is that something that you have to kind of think, right, it's just another game? Obviously, it's not just another game, but do you have to kind of think like that?
Yeah, you have to, and I didn't at the time. Like, that's probably one thing I not got wrong, but probably didn't deal with as well as I could have. Was, I did build it up in my head because it was such a big deal, and it was almost just allowed that feeling of, oh, I've got to do well in these 2 games because then, there's so many people, so much good competition around me that one of them will take the mantle if not. And rather than approaching it as it's another game, you're good enough you're playing for a reason. It's not like you're just filling in for someone. Probably got that a little bit wrong, but definitely if you can try and think about it like that, it's certainly going to make things easier.
And then how did you sort of comprehend how it was going to go when, obviously, it was against New Zealand, wasn't it? So obviously the unbelievable test team, that they're all right, they can do a job. How did it feel then, sort of after the series? And then was it similar reflections based on what you mentioned earlier in terms of, right, play for England now, you can almost have that feeling of playing at the highest level. Was that same reflections there as you would just playing another game for Gloucester? Obviously, no disrespect to Gloucester at all, playing extremely high standard. But is it similar now that you look back on it?
Yeah, I think at the time, I probably look back now and think it probably it was probably of detriment to me the few weeks leading up after that. I probably went back and thought, oh, now that I've played at that level, I need to be dominating this level. I need to be scoring runs every game and dominating people. And it probably led to a couple of, faults coming about in my game because, I changed the way I was going about things, which was obviously so good beforehand and the reason I got selected. So I probably went away from that for a little period, which meant, I didn't do as well coming out of it as when I went in. And that was something, I had to figure out. And looking back now, it was different, but I think I view, Gloucestershire now as I think wherever I play now, I just view it exactly the same, going with the same mentality, try for like none of the outside noise to get in, whether it's club cricket in Australia, county cricket here, club cricket here. If I was to get back on the Lions or anything like that, I think I just approach everything in the same way because, it's the same sport and you therefore don't let the external things affect you as much.
And this might be a little biased from me, but I can say it because I can. In terms of the omission afterwards, when obviously for the next series, how difficult was it then to, like you mentioned, you probably found it a bit difficult going then back to county cricket, which led to some faults. How was it psychologically for you, then having that almost that chance taken away, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, hard. It was a bit of a struggle. Like, it was hard to sort of fathom that I was there. I was part of it, and then you're just not. And that's no fault of like the selection or the people who did it. That's just sport. Like, you're just there one minute and you're not the next, which was strange. I got back on the Lions the winter following, which was good that was a good confidence booster in terms of feeling like I was still pretty close.
Yeah.
And then, for whatever reason, new coach, new captain, new style of play, new everything else. My form maybe dipped a little bit, and you suddenly find yourself quite far away again. I don't feel any animosity towards that. I just think, that's it. I can get back in as quickly as I sort of came out, sort of thing. So I think I have a much more healthy view on that now as I did at the time. At the time, it was the end of the world, but you learn quickly that you can get back just as quickly as you leave.
It's a classic view of, I think, if you probably wouldn't feel upset about it, you probably didn't care enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What kind of, because obviously that was towards the back end of the summer, and then once you finished sort of the season, then obviously I could remember asking you if you had gone to Australia the following sort of year for that winter. Was it a case of having the goal to get back in the test team straight away, or to get back to form and then knowing that it could happen again if the form rose again? Because I think I had this at one point where I'm thinking way too far ahead, and things become a bit cloudy in the moment. And you just you can't really see almost the next week. You can't really see the next week, let alone the next year. So how, after having that experience, is it about almost staying in the moment rather than looking a bit too far ahead?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think I had days where I was very good at seeing it like that, and days where I was like, no, I want to get straight back in. I think for the next sort of 8-9 months, it was probably like that. And I think going away with the Lions that winter, I went away. It was pre-Ashes, so I went to Oz and got 100 for the Lions. So I was like, oh, I'm almost there. Like, surely, the main side's batters weren't doing particularly well. and I was like, oh, perfect, I've got the runs. I'm ready to go back, sort of thing. And I didn't get picked, and that was probably the best thing for me. And it showed me, I think it was a good confidence booster in terms of my game still in a good spot, but I probably needed a little bit more time to, as you said, put those performances together, enjoy getting back in with the Gloss setup and enjoy my cricket a little bit more, because I was putting myself under so much pressure that I wasn't really enjoying the game as much. And even now, I'm now sort of really so focused this year on Gloss and our results that it makes me feel like it's a much healthier attitude towards it than I had probably 18 months ago then.
Can you help yourself, though, at some points when, start of last season, scoring a few hundreds in succession, is it almost tough to think, like, Cole couldn't be too far away here, or do you have that, like, mental toughness to just go, like, just focus on Gloss? And that's pretty much
no,
it?
of course, the mind wanders. Like, you see people saying stuff and rumours fly about, and you always take them into account. You've got to just try and take them for what they are, and as rumours. I think it's actually a lot easier now, where McCullum and Stokes have been so honest and open about what they're looking for in players and how they want people to play, and it's not just going to be about who scores the most runs, because therefore, like, I feel like you're never going to expect a call because you never know what they're thinking. Whereas before it would have been, oh, I'm averaging 50, I've hit 300s in 5 games. They got to pick me, like I'm scoring the most runs out of anyone. Whereas now it's not that clear cut. So I think not really knowing means that you're going to be just purely focused on the task at hand and winning games in county cricket.
What was your mentality when they almost had that clear path to being in England set up in general? Because, like you said, and I think Callum mentioned it as well, a new coach comes in, they have this Bazball format, and you're almost like, well, should I change my game, or do I need to change my game because of the way that they want to play?
Yeah.
Or do you almost have to rein it back and just be like, I'm just gonna be James, and I'm just gonna play the way I want to play, and if it comes about, it comes about?
Yeah, I'm definitely in that sort of latter bracket. I mean, I don't think if I went and tried to play like Stokes or Harry Brook, it would go very well. So I'm like, that's not me putting myself down. It's just that's just not how I play the game. And I think if I play my best cricket, I'll probably score at a good enough rate anyway. It's not like they've put labels on it that you've got to strike at 100 or you've got to strike at 110. You've just got to be positive and take the positive option and try and win games. Like, they're looking for people to win games. So if I can find my method of doing that, we've discussed this as a team with Gloss. So I don't think anyone's going to go out there and just start running at their first ball. It's just a very sort of little shit, as fun as it'd be. It's just a very small shift in mentality in terms of how we're going to do it our way. And we've discussed that quite a lot. Like, lads are, and it's amazing how different lads view it.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, mate. That's an awesome insight, because I think do you reckon it depends as well, like county to team based on that? Because I don't know, in my mind, and I'm being a bit of a cricket tragic here, a bit of a cricket nut here, but I'm thinking, right, well, if a county has X many England players in their team, or X county has a number of players who play more white ball format compared to red ball teams, do they change their ways about it? And I personally, looking at the couple of streams that I did and watching of a couple of innings that you played as well, it almost didn't seem like that was the case. And I wanted to ask you how that sort of then impacts maybe individual players in terms of, does squads change a bit more based on different teams as well? Because obviously, like I said, at some points coaches are, look, we're going to play a bit more aggressively. It finds that they're scoring more runs in Test cricket, so we got to score more runs in county cricket.
Yeah, there's so many different factors. I mean, like, for a start, we've discussed this a little bit, is, the pitches are always going to be better at Test level. Yes, the bowlers are better, but, the pitches are going to be in line with that, and they're going to be more sort of open to, more open to stroke making. Especially, a lot of county decks early season, they're not going to be great wickets. They're going to be tough to bat on, and games are going to be high paced anyway. So you don't really need to force it too much. The other thing we thought about was in international cricket, you play a series and you're looking to win that series of 3, 4, 5 games, or whatever it is. And there's sort of less consequence on those results, apart from, you've got the Test Championship, whatever. But county cricket, we're playing 14 games across a year, getting the odd draw here and there when you're maybe on the back foot, or, if you're trying to stay up, picking up those points to get a draw, a lot more, they mean a lot more than maybe in international cricket. So it's hard just to look at it as, we're going to go out and try and win every game, and we'd rather risk losing to try and win, because there's a little bit more to think about in terms of trying to get promoted, avoid being relegated, that sort of stuff, which might come into play.
That's awesome, mate. That's awesome. In terms of what's your psychologically, what is your mindset changing formats then as well? Because like I mentioned earlier, mate, county cricket's ridiculously busy.
Yeah.
And obviously, I spoke to Jim after when you played Glamorgan last year at Spire Gardens, when I went to watch the game, and it almost seems as if you're just like, you're always on the next move. You're thinking about the next game.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the next game. What's your mindset in terms of both that busy schedule, but along with looking again? Do you have to look at a certain team a little bit more in advance, or is it just like next game?
Yeah, especially in T20, you've got to be really you've got to almost know where you've got to be in the next 2 weeks. Like your games, I'm away at Glamorgan this day, then we're back home the next day, and then we've got 2 days, and then we're at Hampshire, and you've got to start thinking about how that might look, which you obviously don't want to look too far ahead, but you've also got to be prepared. It's the same as like when in the middle of the season, you've got like a 4-day game, and then you've got a day off, and then you've got a T20, and then you've got a day off, and then you've got a 4-day game again. So you start to think about, how am I going to be ready for both? And you're like, they're having a red ball net in the morning before a white ball game, before you have your white ball hit, so that you've done enough red ball to be prepared for the red ball, but also your white ball.
Crazy.
Yeah, and it is tough work, but I think, it's one of the skills that if you can get it right in professional cricket, you're going to be really, really effective, because there's not many who can get it right.
And what about, again, this might be contrary to my opinion, but I'm going to say anyway, in terms of your way about going things in a white ball game compared to how you might go about things in a red ball game, how does that change specifically? Because I'm really interested in this question. And we've got obviously a question from the public section a bit later on, but obviously this was one specifically which I wanted to ask in a bit more detail, because I found this question really, really sort of intriguing.
Yeah, I think so red ball I see as quite, it's quite individual and quite personal, and you go about it in your way, and your method doesn't really change too much. Obviously, if you're chasing a target or trying to save a game or something, it comes into play. But for example, like first innings of a red ball game, you go about your processes and your method, and you play each ball on merit as you would play it. And I feel like, therefore, when you're in good form, it's easier to really pound on the runs, because if you're in a good rhythm and you're, lining the ball up well and leaving the ball well and playing balls on merit, then, it can just, that's when you feel like you're not thinking and everything's just really natural. In white ball, obviously, there's so many more factors to consider, if you're chasing or setting, bowling matchups, where you are on the table and who you're playing, and bowlers and what deliveries they've got, and the crowd, and all these sort of things come into play. And there you've just got to, I just find it useful just being really aggressive. Doesn't mean I'm going to try and hit every ball for 6, but, before each ball's bowled, I'm like, right, I'm committed to whatever I'm doing, whether that's sitting on a bowler and trying to work them, or whether I'm trying to hit them out the park. You just got to be really aggressive in your mindset, rather than in red ball, where I want to be really chilled and calm and collected and sort of in my own bubble. That all sort of goes out the window a little bit in white ball, because it's so fast paced.
And what about sort of your opinion and approaches to your technical stuff throughout those busy times, like we mentioned before? Because some coaches are going to be really, really in favor of, white ball skills and their specific nature of those. And then some are going to be contrary to popular opinion, where, good technique hits good shots. And then you see T20 cricket leagues around the world, players running down the track and smacking them over the head. And reverse ramping it for 6, and you're just like, mate, where is that in the cricket?
Yeah.
Where?
I'm very much like, especially as a county cricketer where you've got to play all 3 formats. I think just building it on solid foundations is like the main thing. If you've got solid foundations and you can go into a net and you can, you can defend the ball, you can drive the ball, you can pull and cut. I think having those basic foundations and making sure they're really, tip-top, clinical, precise, then all the funky stuff comes from that. Because if you're hitting the ball well from a strong position, you're then going to be able to just extend on that and hit 6. Or if you're going to try and scoop and reverse scoop, you're in a position to do that rather than being, unbalanced or trying to, your head's in the air or stuff like that. I just think if you can build that solid foundation, everything funky and creative and power comes from that.
That's awesome, mate. That's awesome. And we're gonna push on. We're gonna push on, mate, because I've got some specific bits I want to ask you in terms of your mental approaches to preparing for games. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it might differ, it might not, maybe between different opponents, maybe some different counties. But what's your approach? Because I'm very aware that in terms of when we have a cricketer on, not only do I get excited because I'm an absolute badger, there's a lot of sort of younger audience that watch because they're fans of yourself and other cricketers as well. So what's your approach to coming to a game? Is it similar routines, or is it knowing that you've prepared enough? Do you have to hit a million balls before a game starts or the day before?
I'll do most of any technical focus will all come the day before. I do like to hit balls on the morning of a game, but never more than like 10 minutes, just to sort of feel like I'm facing my first 30 balls so that I'm ready when I get out there. Feel a couple out the middle of the bat, feel a couple not out the middle of the bat, and sort of get into a rhythm. That's nice. I think going into a game, I don't know, it's just nice. I think recently and this winter in particular, I look forward to every game. I look forward to getting to the ground. I look forward to having, playing, which is awesome. That's the best place to be is the night before. You're really excited because you've got a game tomorrow. You're not thinking, oh, I'm scared because they've got so-and-so bowler that might get me out like this. I think that's when it's not too nice. But I think when I'm in the best headspace, I'm rocking up to the ground and I'm really excited about what's coming. Like tomorrow, we got our first pre-season game and I'm buzzing for it. It's a great feeling. So, and then therefore you rock up and you don't do too much. You do enough that you feel like you're ready, but you don't feel like you have to do too much because you're scared of what might happen and you're trying to prepare yourself for every possible thing that could happen.
That's brilliant, mate. And in terms of, have you ever had a point where that excitement's not been there? Because I think, again, playing the amount of cricket you do, it's not a surprise if you did, like, sort of didn't rock up and be excited. It's about like, I'm a bit knackered, actually.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a case like that?
I reckon every season I've had like spells where I've been like that, like the odd game where you just feel like I'm just lethargic and knackered, and I've played this many games in this many days, and I just need a day off. And after I've made my England debut, it was a bit like that because I was, really disappointed with how it went, and things weren't going quite as well as they were, as I said before that debut. So, I just felt a bit fragile, and I was focusing so much on trying to get back in, putting so much pressure on scoring runs that it wasn't happening anyway, and I wasn't enjoying it. So, I think every cricketer's had it. It's just about, when you maybe do feel like that, is trying to take a step back when you do have the chance and refreshing and getting ready to go again, and getting around your teammates, which is the best part about the job.
That's fantastic, mate. That's a brilliant insight because I think, like you said, it's you have to be a robot to not have those opinions at some point, mate. So, mate, we're going to get on to the questions from the public section because I'm very, very aware that I don't want to keep you for too long, mate. So we're just going to go on to them now.
Yeah, of course.
So we had a really, really good one to start us off with, which is what, apart from a lot of questions about darts, mate, which I'm going to call out all your squad members on, mate. If they are watching, mate, I'm calling you out. Right? So in terms of what's your best advice for a young wicketkeeper, that's obviously very, very specific to that. But what is your best advice, mate?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to work with a few, really good coaches. Bruce French, Michael Bates, who I work with at the moment. there's also a great page on Instagram, a guy called Josh Sivier, who works the wicket keeping coach, and they all sort of follow similar, principles around, having a really good base, and really strong hands, and trying to be really aggressive and taking the ball as close to the stumps as we can and getting back as quickly as we can, and just doing it all from a really simple, strong base. It's a really simple skill, wicket keeping, which not an easy skill, very simple. Theoretically, is a simple skill. You're there to catch the ball, so making sure that is your main focus, not focusing too much on how you're moving or how you're catching the ball, or what angle your feet are at, and all this sort of stuff is just finding the best way for you to catch as many balls as you can, and every little tweak that you make, you just got to remember that's you're not going to catch every ball. No one does. No one ever will. But giving yourself the best chance to catch as many balls as you can.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Hope we answered your question there. Well, James, I didn't answer. So this final one is brilliant one, and obviously you don't have to if you don't want to, but it's a case of, they said, can you be happy now that you've made your England debut, or would you always constantly strive for that again? And obviously we spoke about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, for example, I think they're getting at, could you retire and be happy, or would you want to almost make that a point?
No, as much as that is sort of the pinnacle of cricket, is obviously representing your country. Yeah. But I feel like there's so much more that I want to achieve. Just because I've achieved that, there's actually a lot of stuff that, if people were to put it on like a timeline, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't done that I would have wanted to do. I want to win competitions with Gloss. I'd like to, captain the side at some point. I'd like to, I think that journey of going from a junior player to a senior player, I want to sort of see that and be able to help people coming through. And all these things, aren't going to happen overnight. So that's what the sort of stuff that keeps me motivated to come back every day and, want a career for another, hopefully 10, 12 years, rather than just thinking, I've done. If people would have said to me when I was 16, what's your aim in cricket to play for England? Now that I've done that, it's not that that's it and done. There's loads of other stuff that I want to achieve. Playing franchise cricket as well is something else. And continue traveling the world. It's the best job in the world, because we get to do that for work. So to continue to do that is another thing. So no, I don't think I could retire and be happy. There's definitely a lot more stuff that I want to achieve.
That's brilliant, mate. That's an awesome insight. I was a bit worried about that question. I wanted to make sure that I asked it in the most respectful way possible. So, but yeah, thanks so much for being open, mate. And we're going to go into the closing notes, mate.
Yeah.
So, has there been one or a number of individuals who have inspired you in your journey, maybe thus far and maybe beyond?
Inspired me. I mean, I've had coaches, along the way that have, not inspired me in terms of giving me terrific insight on my game and been that one thing that's made me the player I am or anything like that. I've had coaches growing up. My Winterbourne youth coach, my college coach, who was the academy coach at Gloucestershire at the time as well. They were great sort of influences on my career. Inspiring, obviously, you look to like the greats of the game. I've always looked up to, Kumar Sangakkara, Alistair Cook, these guys, because I loved how they played the game. Graham Smith, I love how they play the game. In terms of people who inspire me, and again, like my brother growing up as well, he was older. He didn't necessarily make it as a professional cricketer himself. He got real close. But inspired me in terms of, he did it the hard way, and he inspired me when I was younger to keep along that path and stay determined and working hard, because I saw that you can make big progress in a small amount of time.
That's brilliant, mate. That's brilliant. And finally, mate, I always like to finish on this point, so probably close to one of my favourites, if not maybe the icebreaker as well. What is one piece of advice you would give to anyone who wants to be the next James Bracey, anyone who wants to be the next wicketkeeper for their county, for their country, or anyone who just wants to be a good bloke, mate, because you're a bloody good bloke. And what's one piece of advice that you would give?
Yeah, I'd it might sound weird, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think I could come out and say enjoy the game. That's great. But I'd actually say growing up, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think enjoy other sports, enjoy getting into loads of team environments, enjoy your studies where you can, and that I'll always vouch for, going to university as well and experiencing that. But just try and do as much as you can in terms of, if you're a really keen sports person, play rugby, play football, do athletics, swimming, these things, and figure out what you like. I don't really like how people specialize so quickly like these days. I think I loved how I played football and went snowboarding and went skating and went all these things. Whereas now you see 10-year-olds just not doing anything else because they play cricket. I think that will come in time, and I think the development you get from all those other aspects is so key to becoming as you said, a well-rounded sort of person rather than just someone who plays cricket.
That's brilliant, mate. That's brilliant. What an insight that is, mate. What an insight. That's a brilliant piece of advice, mate. We speak about that at uni as well, and how much benefit that has to sort of them as a young athlete. So definitely vouch for that as well, mate.
Yeah.
Brace, just want to thank you so much for your time.
No
mate.
problem at all. My pleasure.
I'm going to hold myself accountable. He has just travelled today, so a massive thank you, and give him plenty of love in the description as well, ladies and gents. So really appreciate that, mate, and thank you again for coming on.
No problems, anytime, mate. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what an unbelievable episode that was to film with James. I think I'll be honest and say that it was almost a different vibe to the podcast there, but I liked it. It was a case of, from someone who's played at such a high level, and I almost found this with Lauren's podcast as well, and it was a case of that it was all about understanding that there was determination to almost get back to a certain level, and obviously it's really important, and it was such a good insight that James had about just focusing so much on Gloucestershire stuff and staying in the moment, and that's a skill where I don't think a lot of people have. I think I was guilty of it as well when I was younger, and it was a case of looking too far ahead, and then that affected my performances in the moment. So the insights that James gave was absolutely unbelievable. So if you're listening, mate, thank you so much for your time, your openness, your honesty, and your just ability to sort of answer each of the points to the best of your abilities, especially the England stuff, because it's hard. It's so hard, and I was so worried about that when we sort of agreed to have a chat, because it's a difficult thing to speak about. If I was in his shoes, I knew I would find it really difficult to chat. Not that I wouldn't, but it's a tough topic to speak about. So, but guys, obviously a massive supporter of James and what he's doing. So make sure you please give him plenty of support in the description. Follow him on all social media platforms, and wish him the best of luck for the upcoming season. And we hope he absolutely smashes it and earns the right to wear those 3 lines again. So a massive thank you to you guys for watching again. Please do consider sharing the podcast if it helps you, or you think it might help another person. Even if you're not a cricketer, please do. And we will see you guys next week, in fact next Wednesday, for another episode of the Fitzness Podcast. Take care, guys.